in this chapter, we're going to formally start learning about CSS and how to format your web pages. And in the past, we've been throwing in some HTML and bolding stuff. And this is actually the latest and the greatest of HTML. It's HTML5, and we're going to learn about divs and containers and cascading style sheets, and also what ASP.NET brings to the table. It adds some features and stuff. And so we're going to learn how to create a style sheet and how to apply it, and where all the styles apply its styles to the forms of an application. And we're going to learn about the terms related to HTML, element blocks, and inline elements, difference between block elements and inline elements, and tags, and what a self-closing tag is, and where attributes are and stuff. We know all this already. It's just so we maybe are not familiar with the formal terms for it. And then what these HTML semantic elements bring to HTML5 semantic elements bring, and where you include cascading style sheet information, and different types of CSS selectors, cascading style sheet selectors by element or by class or by ID. We'll see how that works. And so that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to start out with the same application that we created in our last week. It's this future calculation thing, and all we're learning, and we're just going to be learning how to use style sheets to place these elements so they look a little bit more appropriate. Okay, so HTML. That's okay. So when we open up a new form, when we say create a new form, we just end up with something like this, and it's got these div tags here for a division block, and then we're going to add a title tag, which is what you see up at the top. And then we're going to, then we add this link tag here, which defines a cascading style sheet file, which has got a bunch of style sheet information in it. And then these tags here, these like header and main, the header tags here, those are special HTML5 semantic elements where there's like one header in a page, and there's a main section, and then there's a footer section, and those are just additional elements that we can use, and we can specify styles for them, and that's where we determine what kind of browser we're on. We select the style based on that, and it affects like the headers and these other semantic elements. What ASP.NET brings are these extra features where we can specify a label for a particular element, and that ties it in and affects styles. There's this new CSS class type of class. When we are using ASP.NET, where we've got a lot of this Visual Studio has got a lot of nice tools to help us produce this code, IntelliSense and so on to finish once we start typing. But these, for example, CSS class, that's an ASP.NET attribute. Or this is an ASP.NET tag. It starts with ASP, and when we actually view the source, it looks different, of course. When we view the source in our browser, we're seeing straight old HTML with straight old CSS, defined by the standards committees of the world that define this stuff. And what Visual Studio does is provide these added things which help make what we do often easier. And so we're going to be learning this stuff. And so these are different validator or different classes and so on. And we'll be defining all these things. So this is the code that we're going to end up with when we're done with this application, and we're going to actually add this code in there. This is what an external style. This is what a style sheet looks like, and this is what the style sheet looks like for this particular application. We can define styles like this in a separate file, and that's this .css file. Or secondly, we can define them up in the head section of an HTML document. Okay, that's not header section, that's the head section. That's the regular HTML head section above the body, up where the title tag is. We can use a style tag, define a CSS there. And then also we can include a style attribute in any tag and then include some formatting information there. So this here defines some attributes for anything in the body. And so it defines a default font, it changes the default font family, says the size is 85% of what it was, sets the width of the body. So you'll notice that everything fits in this 550 pixels. It actually puts a border around it, and that's this here, this padding and so on. This defines a style, gives us some extra style and a specification to the H1 tag, the header tag, and then this is what a label looks like. And these apply to regular HTML tags, regular elements, objects, document objects. And these define classes. So you know how when you're making a tag and you have an attribute in there that says class equals something, well, that's these things. So we're defining a class called entry, and we're going to use that probably for input stuff. We're going to define a class called validator, which we're going to use to display out our validation alerts. They're going to be red. And then we've defined one for button, which we're going to use on the two buttons. So these are classes, and we actually have to say class something, or we might say CSS class something. These are styles for the actual server controls, and these refer to the IDs. Each element, you can give it an ID, and we of course give elements IDs because we want to refer to them in JavaScript, but you can also use them to refer to define styles just for those particular IDs. And so there you use a pound sign in front. These are some common HTML elements which you know already. I think you know all these. These are H1, which are headers, levels of headers, different size headers. The P is a paragraph. It defines a paragraph. And these are blocks. Blocks means when you define a new one of these, it's going to start it on a new line. So when you have paragraphs, there's going to be the paragraph is always going to start on a new line, and then you can have like margins and padding and so on to put some space in between the blocks. This is for an image to display. This is for a form, and then these here are what are called inline elements. And if you put a bunch of inline elements along horizontally, they're going to be horizontal unless they're at the end of the page and you wrap. Whereas these, if you put two headers right next to each other horizontally, the second header is going to end up appearing below the first header. And the A is, of course, to create a link. And you can create a link off to another page, or you can create a link someplace else on the same page. And this is an input form element, like a text box or a button. This is a label. And then this is simply a break where if you want to force a blank line or force a new line, you use a BR tag. So these tags have, they should have a start element. They should have a close, and lots of tags look like this, where there's the beginning of it, and then the end of it. You're not seeing my. There's the beginning of it. No, that doesn't work. Laser pointer. There's the beginning of it. Oh. Here, let me point. All right. Okay, so there's these tags here. There's the beginning of the tag, and the end of the tag, and the end of the tag is denoted by a backslash like that. See, and same with paragraph tags. Some tags are all by themselves. They don't need to have a second part. So you generally with HTML5 is of course the old way is okay, but you actually put a self-closing tag there. You put a backslash or a slash at the end of the tag itself. And this is how to code the attributes. So these are attributes. This href, of course, is the address of where you go to when you click on this link. The link here is the text that's linked, that's hot, is in between these two. It's in between this is the beginning A tag, and this is the end right here. And this is what's going to be hot. And and this title is what you see when you roll the mouse over this contact us. See, in this thing, all you're going to see is contact us, but it's going to be a link. The whole thing is going to be hot. And but if you roll your mouse over, you're going to see this click to contact, or you're going to see this thing sort of pop up, And then this class is what gives it its formatting. And of course, the default style of an A tag is the font is blue instead of black, and there's an underline. So font color is blue, and text decoration is underlined. And so if you don't like blue font, then inside here, well, you can define a class, or you can actually put a style tag in here, and you can say font, just color. For the font color, it's just the word color, not font. Color, color colon blue will work, or if you don't want blue, if you want black, color colon black. And then if you want to get rid of the underline, you do text dash decoration colon normal, and that'll remove the underlining. Okay, and then you can make comments inside your HTML. You know this already. You close them in these comment tags here. And let's say you actually there's some special characters. There's a few special characters. If you want a space, and you want to make sure there's a space there, you can use this set of characters, ampersand NBSP semicolon. Make sure you put the semicolon, and that'll give you a non-breaking space. A non-breaking space means like let's say you have a title or phrase or something, and you don't want the words to be split up. Like you don't want there to be a break in the middle to go to the next line. Instead of just putting a space in between the words, you can put this in between the words, and then it'll force a space, but it'll also keep them together. So if there's not enough room it's going to put the page break before it. There's other ones like ampersand BULL semicolon. We'll put a bullet And there's other ones like for non-breaking hyphens and dashes and so on. These are the primary HTML5 semantic elements, and these are just plain old tags that have beginning tag and a closing tag, and they're just by virtue of their name. But you can go ahead and define different styles for them and all that, and that way there's rules like you can only have, there's got to be a header if you have a header, there's got to be a header. It's at just one of them at the top, one footer at the bottom, one main section, and so on. So a page that's structured with header, main, and footer elements would look like this. And so you see that there's a header. This ampersand copy semicolon puts the copyright symbol. So if we look and see what this actually looks like, it's going to look something like this. Not the shadow, but this is the header, this is the content, and this is going to be down at the bottom. There are these are more HTML5 elements, and a div is just a block that provides a container for other elements, and then a span is a same kind of thing except for it's just an inline element. So if you just have some text someplace and you want to style that some way, and you want it to be inline, and all that, you just use a span, just enclose it in a span. But if you have these blocks with divs you can do a lot more. Like, for example, you can define a div as a row div, and that can be a container for a table row. And then you can have these other divs, which are column divs, and those go inside of the row div. And you can put a hyphen like a div class call -50 would be a 50% column width div, and so you got to make sure they add up to 100 and so on. You might see something like this. Okay, this is the way it used to be, where we'd have divs before HTML5, but then you'd put IDs, and then you would define your style sheets based on using the £sign kind of style sheet definition, where you have a header ID header like this, and your style sheet will define what a div with ID header what the style is. And so it would look like this. Span elements in the HTML for JavaScript application. This is where we've seen span elements before in our JavaScript in the first few weeks of the class. And because so it's just inline, but because there's an ID there, there is an attribute for the span tag called inner HTML. And when you set inner HTML to something, then whatever you set it to gets put inside here. So you can replace the asterisk with something by addressing this span element by name, and then specifying that the inner HTML of this span element is something else. And so these are special span elements that are generated by ASP.NET, and with these special names and this special class, and this is what the error message is, and of course the style, the display here gets turned on and off. The range, the class validator defines how it looks and so on, and then this additional style tag here is set. We use that to either turn to make it visible or not. And so there's JavaScript in there which refers to this ID here. When you've this is a required field, and when the field isn't filled in, then there's JavaScript which looks and checks to see that the field's not filled in, and then if it's not, it turns this display on and then this message appears right there, and that's how that works. That's handled in JavaScript. And again, in ASP.NET or in Visual Studio, we write this, and then Visual Studio compiles that into the HTML, the standard, CSS that will, take care of this. So when you view the source, you see something a little bit different. Okay, there's 3 ways to provide styles. Either an external style sheet, which you put this up in the head section, or you can embed styles in the head section itself. So instead of having this thing here, you have this style block here, and it looks the same. And the third way to do it is by putting it right in the tag itself. So you can put a style attribute inside of a span. Span. Okay, in this particular span right here, it looks like all it's used for is to style this word here, warning, because there's not even an ID. So it's not being referred to by anything else. It's not being referred to by CSS, and must not be being referred to by JavaScript either. So that's all this is for. And this is a common use. Turns out that you can put a style attribute in anything, pretty much anything. And you can, if there's text in there, you can change the font, you can change the color, and if it's going to have a height and a width. Like if it's a text box, it'll have a height and a width. You can mess with the height and the width and all those kinds of things. So there's 3 ways. There's the style sheet, there's the style block up in the header, and then there's style attributes in the tags themselves, and they're applied this way in this order. They're actually applied. Well, they're applied in the order that they're encountered, and so you have a style sheet. You have an external style sheet, and that's going to be encountered first because the HTML page loads, and it starts at the top, and as soon as it hits that first style sheet, link definition, it's going to bring that in, and it's going to process all of the styles that are defined in there, and so the web page or whatever goes merrily along its way with these new styles defined, and then it encounters embedded styles, and those would be styles defined right up in the head, and that would be encountered after the style sheet, and then so that's defined up at the top of the HTML document. But right when the browser is processing the individual tags themselves, there could be style attributes in there, and then those are processed there. Now, one question you may have, which I don't have the answer to off the top of my head from experience, but I believe that the answer is, if you have a link to a style sheet above some embedded style information in the head, of course the style sheet gets processed first, and then the embedded style gets processed second. But what happens if you have embedded style at the top above the link? Because you can have you can have a style block, in the head, and then below the style block, you can have a link to an external style sheet. I'm not sure, but maybe we'll try it. Maybe we'll test it today. So this particular example here links to 2 style sheets. And the sequence in which the style sheets are applied, the first from the first external style sheet to the last external style sheet. To generate a link element to the source view, okay, so this is Visual Studio. This is how you do it. You just, drag. You're going to have the style sheet in your Server Explorer. Is that not Server? What's the right tab called again? Anyway, we'll get back to that. Let me start this up where I left off. Slideshow, current slide. So we'll see how that works when we pull up Visual Studio. This HTML can be selected by type, class, or ID. So you can refer to it by the type, which is the type of the tag, or the class here, or the ID. 3 rule sets with type selectors. Three rule sets with type selectors. 3 rule sets. Rule set number 1. Let's just do it. Rule set number 1. Rule set number 2. And rule set number 3. And these are the type selectors: a body type, a main type, and a paragraph. And these are 2 rule sets with class selectors. It defines a blue class and a right class. That's the names of the classes. And this is what the rule set is for the blue class and for the right class. And this shows 1 rule set with an ID selector. So there's going to be an element in there that's got ID equals first heading, and that particular ID is going to have this rule set applied to it. Some of the styles in the external style sheet of the future value application. Okay, so the future value application comes with this already in there, and we'll see it. So we're going to open up a new future value application in exercise 3 in the slides in the student download for exercise 3. And when we open it up, it's just going to have this in it, and we're going to add this. And then we're going to add this for text boxes and drop-down menus, and this is for text boxes. This will be a style for the drop-down menu, which selects the month, and this is a style for the label, the future value label.